Hello, and welcome to the Soul Shaking Love podcast. This podcast is dedicated to bringing you expert teachers on how to have a mind, body, and spirit connection, both with yourself and with your true love. And today I am so excited to interview Zoey Sharif. Hello, Zoey.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So Zoey is an author and coach. She's author of the book Love Can In Fact Be Calculated. So
hmm
I'm really, really excited because we're going to talk about, of course, Zoe's journey, but then she's developed a formula. She spent 2 decades really decoding these patterns of human attraction, pulling from her background in criminology and data analytics, and a drive to challenge everything we've been taught about love. But of course, it comes down to our self-worth and these formulas on our values and really these very deep aspects of compatibility that can also be calculated, but of course they're also deeply intuitive when we really have that self-worth and emotional intelligence. And so I am just so excited to dive deep. I know these concepts can be a little bit esoteric, and I know Zoe knows how to ground them for us and make them practical.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks so much for the intro. Where shall I start? Where would you like me to start?
Yeah, so I'm sure everyone's curious. What inspired you to explore this idea that love can be calculated in the first place before we really dive into what you've discovered?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I know I've always inherently been emotional, and just love to love. And I ended up studying criminology in school. Around the time that I was studying criminology, I had my heart broken by my long-term partner at the time.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, I had this laser focus on understanding love, especially someone like me, because I feel love on such a soul level. And I'm sure I don't want to say that I feel it more than anyone else, but there's a chance that I'm more analytical about it, or maybe there's just something there. There's something there where I needed to understand it. I needed to, yeah, just see the information, the theories that are out there. And from everything that I looked into, back when I was in school, when I shifted my focus from criminology to love and relationships, I came across this one liner that said, "You can't fall in love with someone who's not a match." And then I started applying that to my own situation and how I was cheated on and how I was heartbroken. So I'm like, okay, well, I need to understand how to measure a match. And that's where this whole theory started. I created an entire framework, and in the last 20 years, I took this framework with me, relationship after relationship. I applied it to the relationships around me, and I found that there was a very distinct pattern. So from there on, about 6 years ago, I decided to take it more seriously. And I started writing and writing and writing, building on the framework. Then I went to school for data analytics, and I confirmed through the surveys that we did that, in fact, love can be calculated. I can calculate love. I can predict love. I can predict whether two people will stay together or whether their relationship will fall apart if the misalignments are not checked. And yeah, and that's how this whole thing started. And this is where I'm this is where I am now.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting, because I think a lot of people, and there is still this myth out there that love just happens. We fall in love, and if you're with the right person, that it'll just be easy, which we know it takes a lot of work. Um, but,
hmm
I teach people how to date strategically, but, based on vision, values, other compatibility coordinates, but it's not scientifically it's not based on data analysis. So I'm really excited for you to articulate your formulas. Like, what are some of the most important patterns or factors that determine whether someone's a match?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, it starts with how you evaluate yourself based on your own standards. And this is what we call the top five values. And the total of how you measure yourself against each of those values is called the self score. A self score is a numerical assessment of your self worth. In other words, if you have certain values and you feel like you're not really doing so great. So let's assume one of your values is family, but you feel for whatever reason that you're not showing up as I'm just throwing this out there, right? As a good daughter or a good son, right? Or you feel like you don't put in enough time to go to the family events, or you feel when you do go to these family events, you're a little impatient and you're a little snappy, right? So when you're evaluating yourself based on those values and you give yourself a score, that right there is how you feel you show up as a human. And again, you have your top 5 values. Me personally, I've expanded my top 5 values to top 10 values. I started adding more. The more I understood myself, the more I realized truly what I value besides all the basic stuff like career, finance, whatever, right? I started adding things like peace of mind and freedom and romance. So all those things became values to me. Now, the way you evaluate whether someone is a good match to you is you compare the partner score to the self score.
Mm.
Now, if it's a match, perfect. If they're slightly above, even better, because the analytics show that the couples who are currently together, the partner score had 4% on average above them. Okay. Here's where it gets a little rocky. If the partner score is just slightly under, and we're talking 5% based on the analytics, you're more likely to be in an on and off relationship. Here's the interpretation of that. Your brain is inherently wired to seek a strong mate. Strength will be different across everyone because humans are nuanced and our definition of strength is very different. So, Valerie, for you, strength might be someone who's purpose driven. Strength might be someone who is a family man, right? For me, strength might be someone who I don't even know, let's say a career, right, has a good career, right, or someone who enjoys peace of mind the way that I do, right, that might be strength. So everyone has their own definition of what strong means, and your brain is clocking that every minute of the day when you're with that person or when you're not with that person. You have these internal check boxes, but these check boxes are on steroids and they're evaluating the partner to see if they're a match and if they're quote unquote strong, right? So with that, if you are evaluating your partner as less than you, i.e. not meeting your standards, your neurochemicals, the ones that make you feel attracted to a person, the ones that make you feel happy to be around a person, will not activate. Your oxytocin, right, which is also a hormone, will not activate. Your serotonin, your dopamine, all of that will not activate because brain says, not good enough, next.
Yeah, that
So,
makes sense.
yeah, so when we're talking about numbers, you would think that -5% for a partner is not that bad. You would think that, except that we found from the analytics that those tended to lead to an on and off relationship. And the interpretation here is that if you're not feeling lucky to be with the person, are you really going to put your best foot forward? Are you really going to be a rock for that person? Are you going to be slightly impatient during arguments? Or will you fight for the relationship and will you speak with respect? So that's where the interpretation comes from. In an on and off relationship, if you view the person, the partner, as just slightly less than you, you're likely going to get a little lazy. Well, if you get a little lazy, what's going to happen with the partner? They might get lazy too. Now you've got this back and forth of two people who are saying, well, they're not trying. Why should I? On and off relationship. There you go.
Yeah.
Right. So that's essentially the point of the framework. Now, I've talked about values, but of course, attraction is very important. So the top 5 values is just one part of the equation. The second part of it is top 5 trait preferences. Trait preferences accounts for opposites attracting. So just because you're an extrovert doesn't mean you're necessarily attracted to an extrovert. You might be attracted to an introvert. And the trait preferences will take that into account. So you don't score yourself for traits, you only score yourself for values. That's self-worth. With that, many of us tend to fall into destructive patterns with partners. That's where it's taken into account. It's in the trait preferences. There's something about a trait within the other person that, for whatever reason, whether it's a dysfunction that you grew up with when you were young, or maybe it's something inherent, or maybe, and whatever it may be, the trait preferences, if you see that you have a pattern of attracting that person and being drawn to that person, you would actually add that as a trait preference, whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not. And the goal here is to catch yourself. The goal here is to have some sort of self-awareness that, hey, I'm attracted to emotionally unavailable people. I've seen this across the board in my past. And now this new person that I'm meeting happens to fit that profile. Now, as humans, we have free will. As humans, we are not completely driven by primal instinct. That's an influence. Absolutely. It's one of our core influences, but it's not the end all be all. As humans, we can say, no, I choose not to move forward with this inherent internal drive of mine or attraction. And if you find that based on your top 5 traits, there are destructive traits here, good that you're honest with yourself. That's literally the first step. But now that you're honest with yourself, if you come across someone who fits that, it's your call at this point to say, not this time, not today. I'm gonna wait next.
Yeah. So is the room in your formula? I love the fact that you're being honest with yourself, looking at the common denominators of what you have attracted, because that, as you said, is the first step. You need to know, oh, okay, in my past few relationships, I've been attracted to emotionally unavailable people, to use your example.
Mhm.
And so, of course, now that gives us more awareness. Does your formula also include room to say, okay, this is the trait that I want to be attracted to? Who would I have to be, or what qualities would I have to be embodying in myself? For example, when I work with singles who always attract unavailable people, it's usually because we're emotionally unavailable to ourselves. So then that goes back to our own self evaluation. If I value self empathy, for example, but I'm not living according to that, let's say I really value empathy at a level 5, but I'm only giving it to myself at a 1. So then would your system go all the way back to self and say, all right, what do I need to believe? What practices do I need to implement in order to be emotionally available to myself, so that changes my blueprint of what trait I'm attracted to? Or like, how do you then coach people to change the traits that they're attracted to if it's not what they want?
Yeah. So great question. I don't necessarily advise people to, okay, let me back up. What you're referring to is a value that I've identified called dependability and reliability, which is essentially a rock. The number one value across the board, regardless of age, gender, was dependability and reliability. Now, if you don't have this as your top 5 value, A, you're not going to attract someone who's dependable and reliable because you're not seeing it as important.
Mm-hmm.
B, you're not going to be dependable and reliable to yourself because these are values. This is how you think you show up for yourself, not necessarily for the other partner.
Right.
And then the third one, if you truly like someone or love someone, and that's not a value of yours, that means you're not showing up in this way for the other person. Why would they want to hold on to you if you don't have the qualities of a rock, right? So what you're referring to, I don't put in the trait category. I put that in the values category because it's a decision. It's a
Right.
decision. With that said, in the traits categories, the number one was actually once again, across the board, men and women, generosity and kindness. So those are
Mm-hmm.
things that are more inherent. Those are things, for me, traits are not necessarily easily tweakable. They're not necessarily decisions that we choose to make. It's just what you're drawn to. It's just what makes your cells dance, right? Like Valerie, if I told you a joke, would you laugh or would you not laugh? That's something very deeply personal, very inherent to you, very much so deep in your subconscious that I told you don't laugh at this and you find it hilarious. You're still probably a part of you is going to want to laugh, right?
Yep.
The same thing goes for attraction. The
Yeah.
same thing goes for attraction. You can repress as much as you want, and you can say, like I rather than being attracted to this, I choose to be attracted to this. You can go ahead and, build on that and try to reprogram your subconscious in that way. But I would actually challenge you to first look at the values to see if
Right.
there's a way you can fit it within your values and the traits. Just understand that the pendulum can swing the other way. What I mean to say is if you have a pattern, a true pattern of attracting highly selfish people, highly selfish, and then one day you tell yourself, no, I'm not going to be attracted to selfish people. I'm going to be attracted to generous people without really doing any work and just it's not a choice is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yes,
Traits
we're saying the same thing.
preferences are not necessarily a choice. What is a choice is understanding what you're attracted to and stopping yourself from going into a spiral of going into that dynamic, or at least balancing things out and making sure that the whole package is positive, not just that one trait that, happens to grab you. Does that all make sense?
Oh, yes, yes. I think we're saying the same thing, because I was talking
Yeah.
about going back to values as well and how well we're embodying them. Um, I guess my question is like, let's say you notice that you're attracted to emotionally unavailable people. And so therefore you have that awareness so that you can then, my question was, is there room in your formula to then articulate that there's those four other traits that you're looking for? Let's focus on those. Okay, maybe they're emotionally unavailable and that's what I'm attracted to, but are they also kind? Do they also have the other traits that I'm looking for? So is that what you're saying?
I mean, yes, that is kind of what I'm saying, because at the end of the day, we're looking for matching scores. And the score, you tally that up, right? You calculate that. But with that, you don't have to have top five traits. You can have top 10 traits. And if one of those traits is emotional unavailability, and you've seen in the pattern of your own relationships that that's the one trait that destroys everything, it kind of doesn't matter how much you balance things out. It doesn't matter how you calculate the scores. If that's the one trait that ends up creating inconsistency in the relationship and insecurity and activates an anxious attachment style that you may or may not have, I would challenge you, or not challenge, but I would recommend that you just pass on that person. Again, it comes down to self-awareness.
Right.
You can be attracted to someone, just know what attracts you to them. And if
Right.
you're finding that the main thing that's attracting you is that thing that keeps on destroying your relationships over and over again, as humans, like I said, we have the opportunity for free will. We are not completely bound by our reptilian brain. We have emotional intelligence. We have social intelligence. We have friends who support us. We have therapy. We have Chat GPT now. There's just no reason anymore
Yes.
to not know what you're getting into. At
Yes.
some point, you know exactly what you're doing, and no one can stop you. No matter how many tools we give you, no matter how much advice we give you, it's your call. And if your call is to see how it goes and let's give it one more go and maybe this one will pan out, that's fine. People will learn their lessons in their own time and in their own journey. But if you're over your shit, now would be the time to just say, I pass and I'm going to move along to the next person.
Right. No,
For
exactly. It sounds like so far that your framework gives people that self-awareness because, as you know, when we're in the honeymoon phase, we're swept up by this cocktail of hormones, and
Yeah.
the oxytocin makes us trust people before we should. And so your framework then allows us to be more self-aware, to measure how, first of all, how much am I living true to my values? And then if I live more true, I'll have more self-worth. I'll be attracted to people with more self-worth. That's how it works. And
Huh?
then what am I looking for? And then what traits am I looking for? And gosh, I have the self-awareness to now to know what's important to me and what to keep pursuing or what to not pursue based on that I know this doesn't work for me, even though it feels like so familiar and but I know what's happened in the past when I followed that. So it sounds like,
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, if we grow up in a certain household and certain behaviors become familiar to us, that's essentially what our body, our cells, our mind will say, "Ooh, I want that. It's familiar. I know it." And sometimes it's dysfunctional. And oftentimes, if it is dysfunctional, we start to see our own self-esteem eroding, our own self-worth eroding, our happiness. So I guess at some point you have to decide whether you want to put a stop to whatever is familiar to you and decide to make different decisions for yourself and value peace of mind.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really wonderful way of putting it. And when we do decide to make different decisions, it has to be based on some kind of self-evaluation. And
Yeah.
so, I love how your formula makes that easy to do because you've laid it out in this framework.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you.
so yeah, I mean, I keep I keep on commenting on what you say, but so far you've talked about the values and how that relates to your self-worth. I forgot
Mhm.
exactly the term you called
Self-score. Hmm.
self-score, exactly, that you're scoring yourself and how much you're embodying them. And then of course the traits that you
Hmm.
are attracted to. And so what other measurable patterns are there in your formulas?
Wow. So there's a whole section called the personality types. So I've identified that we all do our scores and score our partners in different ways. There are four different dichotomies. One of them is the practical versus the emotional. So, in other words, do you lean on values more when you evaluate whether someone is a good match to you, or are you more emotional, i.e., are you more into the traits?
Mm.
So, if you fall under any of the extremes, so an extreme emotional or an extreme practical, i.e., you're all the way traits focused or all the way values focused, it's not likely going to be a sustainable relationship. It's not balanced.
Right. That
So
makes
we
sense.
found, mhm. So we found from the analytics that the couples who were currently together tended to be healthy emotionals. What that means is they were just slightly leaning to traits. So still very much taking values into account, but attraction was more important to them, slightly more important than practicality and lifestyle compatibility. So that was kind of cool to see. And in fact, humans in general seem to be that way because a good chunk of the survey takers fell in this category. So that's just one dichotomy. Another dichotomy was the risk taker versus the safety seeker. A safety seeker will look for someone who's just slightly below their score because they want to feel safe. Sometimes it's trauma based, other times it's simply just peace of mind. If we're talking extreme, like they need to know that they're way above their partner, that's 100% trauma based. That means that they've probably had their heart broken and they don't trust humans and they just need to know that they can exit with a intact heart and not feel heartbroken. That's the extreme safety seeker. Very unfulfilling relationship, but it's their comfort zone. Then you have the healthy safety seeker, and that's just a person who wants peace of mind. They just don't need the drama. They don't need to overthink their relationship. They just, they just want things calm, right? Completely fine. The majority of people fell under healthy risk takers, which makes sense. So the risk taker will look for a partner just slightly above them. They want someone that they admire, that they feel lucky to have. And the people who are currently together were actually because their partner was 4% above theirs, that's the healthy risk taker. And then you have the extreme risk taker. This is someone who says, I want to worship my man or my woman. I want to feel so infatuated. I want to have my dopamine hit day after day. And oh my God. And sure, but is that sustainable?
Well, as long as the other
I'm
person
sure we
feels
all
that way
want,
about them, but
yeah.
what's the likelihood of that?
And what's the likelihood of infatuation?
Oh no, of both people feeling that way, because I think it can work if both people
Right.
feel that way, but what's the likelihood of that?
I'm actually not too sure because we did not see couples who are currently together with that big of a mismatch.
Right. Well,
Um,
my point is
so
both of them would have to feel that way. Like, for example, I kind of feel like me and my husband feel that way a little bit, only because I really admire certain things about him and
yeah,
he really admires other things about me. Like
yeah.
he looks up to me in certain ways and I look up to him in other ways,
Mhm.
and but it's like we both look up to each other in different ways, and so then I think it can work, but not if only one person feels that way is what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay, thank you for saying that. There's another section in the book where I talk about green zone, yellow zone, green zone, yellow zone, red zone. So green zone is exactly what you're describing. Two people who have solid self-respect and who slightly admire the other person, not overly.
Right,
And
right,
then we have the yellow zone. This is when two people agree that one person has higher worth.
right. Mm.
That's where we start to see behaviors such as anxious attachment,
Mhm.
avoidant attachment, anxious avoidant, the whole like shebang, right? Neediness, jealousy, playing games, bad communication, all of that, right? We start to see it in that dynamic more because we have one person who's just feeling really uneasy and then the other person gets drained. It's like they
Mhm.
went in for the right reasons, obviously, but when you have one person with a low self-score and low self-worth, they're going to project that into the relationship.
Right,
We
absolutely.
have the third zone, which is the red zone, which is a match of low scores. What do you think is going to happen there? Two people with low self-worth,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
So
no,
clearly
they're
that's not going to work.
right.
Yeah. So what you're describing is the green zone. It's two people who feel solid with who they are and also feel proud of their partner because they have certain qualities about them that they think is awesome, right? And they admire and they feel lucky to be with their partner.
Yeah, yeah. I think it is rare to find that with both people, but I think it's important to have that with both people in different ways.
Mm,
That like that's why I think, well, it goes all the way back to what you were saying in the beginning about traits and really knowing what you admire and for both people to feel that they're admiring something in the other person.
right, exactly, exactly. Because if that's not there, going back to the analytics, if they're just slightly below you, we're talking 5%, that doesn't sound like a lot, right? But if they're just slightly below you, you may get lazy in the relationship. You may get lazy in how you communicate. You may get lazy with making sure you're fitting their standards. So it's really interesting, the human mind, or, I mean, at the end of the day, we're still bound by the reptilian brain, and the whole goal of being human is to evolve and to create offsprings and create strong offsprings, right? At our very basic foundation, that's what it is, reproduction.
Yeah,
So it's
or
really
like if you're in
interesting.
a secure functioning relationship that you have a shared purpose and shared vision and shared values, because like I think not everybody nowadays wants to create children, but especially couples that are dating in their 40s, 50s and beyond. But I think that what you're saying speaks to a huge principle that not a lot of people understand, that if you're not creating something together, which you
So
can't
actually,
do if you're not,
yeah, if
looking at it from the growth perspective that you're talking about, that love,
yeah, if
love
it's
survives.
okay, let me just quickly correct what I meant to say.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about decisions. I'm not talking about two people deciding to have children or not have children. I'm talking about that instinct, the reptilian brain. I'm talking about evolutionary psychology, where at the end of the day, we are all bound by that. And it's interesting to see it in the analytics that no matter how evolved we are, no matter how much we don't care to have children, I don't have kids, by the way, it actually doesn't matter. We still want our brain is still measuring a partner to see if they're strong. Because
Mhm.
if they're just slightly lower than you, the brain is saying, not meeting my check boxes. The brain is saying, well, my chemicals and my hormones will not activate. I choose not to be attracted to this person, and you're turned off.
Hmm.
And when you're turned off, you don't put your best foot forward. So I hope that the audience here understands that I'm not implying in any way that your brain wants to have children. That's not at all. What I was trying to say is that you're bound by a reptilian brain that is still very active today, regardless of how evolved we are.
Hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. And offspring, as you're saying, it's just programmed into us, into our second chakra, if you want to get unscientific, that we're
Mhm.
programmed to create together. And sexual energy is creative energy. And we're not going to be attracted to somebody that we don't respect, who
Exactly.
doesn't inspire us to grow. And if we don't respect the person because we evaluate, however, we're making that evaluation, that they're not as strong as we are, then we're not going to respect them. And then the creative impulse can't be there, the sexual
Mhm.
impulse, the attractive impulse. So, yeah, I
Mhm.
totally agree. And, that's why I think it is so important. It comes down to self awareness and what do I what's my definition of a strong, what's important to me in
Mhm.
that category, and am I living true to that? And
Mhm.
if I'm living true to that, then I'll be more likely to not settle for
Mhm.
somebody else who isn't, because I just don't want to be alone, which like is that low self score.
Mhm.
um and so yeah, when you work with either singles or couples on their compatibility,
Mhm.
how do you have them then determine if they are attracted to somebody that they don't respect, or that is 5% lower? So that it's not going to be sustainable, then what do you tell them?
Well, I tell them to work on it. So the goal with these scores is not necessarily to say, oh, they're lower than me, I'm out. No, definitely not, right? The goal, especially for long-term relationships, you can use this as a tool to express to your partner where you feel they're falling short. So if, for example, your number one value is dependability and reliability, which once again we saw across the board, and you feel that your partner is losing points here, communicate it because they can work on that. And keep in mind, values are at the end of the day decisions and lifestyle choices, whereas the traits, that's harder to tweak. It's hard to say, oh yeah, I choose to be attracted to this person. I'm not saying that, it's not doable, but it requires a lot of mental subconscious rewiring to really, truly, truly, truly be attracted to someone that you inherently were never attracted to, right?
Right.
Unless you start to see deeper layers that you are inherently attracted to. So, for example, if you think that you're not attracted to someone, but then you realize that they're actually very intelligent and very sharp and quick-witted, that might be a part of your programming, that it's like that's something that you're attracted to. So, there may be other layers there that you're not going to see until later on that you realize that you're attracted to, but to actually switch and say, I choose not to be attracted to this, that requires a lot of work. A lot of work. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's just constant, 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 constant rewiring. Because, yeah, your brain has a baseline,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's building new unconscious habits, which I
Hmm.
support people with that, of course. But I agree, it takes at least a couple months
Hmm.
of regular practice to reprogram what we find attractive, if what we find attractive comes from, familiar, unworkable patterns from our past. Um,
Hmm.
but I love what you're saying, that we can then communicate if we notice that we value something and we're attracted to the person, but they're not living true to their values. And we notice that, we can communicate that with kindness, of course. Um,
Of course, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of joke around with people like this is not a tool to bully your partner,
right.
right? But it is absolutely a tool to communicate. So just the way you would communicate love languages. I mean, that's such a common thing today to say my love language is touch or words of affirmations, and the other person immediately understands, doesn't try to fight back. They understand it's something that's inherent to you. So this is a checklist on steroids, and you essentially say, here is my checklist. here's where you used to be, and here's where you are now, and I would love for us to get back into alignment. Now, they may ask you, why do you feel like I've fallen short? So, for example, if communication style and manners is one of the areas where you feel your partner is falling short, and instead of giving them, let's say, a 9 out of 10, you now are giving them a 3 out of 10. They have the right to ask you, okay, why do you feel that way? And then you should tell them, well, I feel like you're snappy with me. I feel like you're short with me, or I feel like maybe you're distant, or I feel like there's not as much like soul love in your words, whatever it may be. Everyone has their own criteria. Explain it. Explain it so that they can work on that, so that they can build back their score. And dependability and reliability, by the way, is such a big one, because that is the number one top five value. So, and that's usually the first thing to go when things are shaky between two people. No one wants to be a rock to someone they feel is a jerk to them. No
Yep.
one wants to be a rock to someone they feel is short and snappy with them.
Yep.
So if that's one of the values that you feel your partner is falling short, it would be positive to give it not blame game, right? But
Right.
it would be positive to say, hey, I would love it if you would have my back in this instance. Or I would love it that I can be at work until 6 p.m. and just know that the kids are okay. Or I would love it for you to understand that, I have sick parent and sometimes I'm gonna be off. And I just need you to not like take it personally and sometimes just let me be at home and let me be off. And just let me just be a rock for that moment. And then if you say something like, and I promise I'll bounce back, and I promise that I'll meet you where you need me to meet you for communication manners, and I promise so both of you need to work together. List out what it is that you value. Give yourself a score and be honest with yourself. And by the way, if you have a low self score, don't expect anything from the other partner. You need to work on yourself first. That's a very big thing. The self score is so important. Once you get yourself to a good self score, then communicate with your partner. If your self score is low because of things that are slightly outside of your control, such as you lost your job because AI is now taken over, for example, right?
Mhm.
Or God forbid, a parent passed away and now you're just shaky emotionally and you can't be a rock for your partner, or your communication style and manners is just not what it used to be because you're clearly stressed, you're clearly grieving. Show that to your partner. Show them that. And just say, look, I'm barely even meeting my own standards. I can see I'm not meeting yours. I'm barely even meeting mine. And hopefully your partner will understand that it's circumstantial and that you're not doing it because you don't love them. You're not doing it because you don't want to be there for them. It's just sometimes circumstances are crap. And we are human and we will be affected. Goal is communication. Goal is being there for each other. Okay.
Mhm.
I would like to add one thing though. If you're finding that you're continuously doing this framework and your partner is simply not meeting your standards and what you need to be happy, and now we're talking several months, we're talking 6 months, we're talking 1 year, we're talking 5 years, my do what you will with the numbers. No one can tell you to do anything, right? It's just a tool to give you insight and perspective. Do what you will with that. But I would ask you if at some point you're beating a dead horse. I would ask you if at some point your self-worth, your peace of mind, your joy is more important. And that'll be a very personal answer. Some people have kids and a mortgage and they feel like it's worth it. And that's completely fine. The analytics showed that the people who chose not to settle have an even higher self score than the people who are currently together. They had the highest self score of the whole group. The
Mhm.
ones who did the breakup had the highest self score. They chose to trust themselves. They chose to work on themselves past the breakup, and they are more fulfilled than literally everyone else. All to say, don't be afraid. I know what that's like to feel fear of not knowing what's on the other side, not knowing what the next chapter will be. And I'm not saying don't work on your relationship. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm trying to say is at some point, are you beating a dead horse? That will be a very personal answer. Everyone will answer it in different ways based on their circumstances. And however you choose to answer it, I just want to give you the confidence that the analytics show that you'll be okay, that you'll probably be okay.
Yeah. Wow, you just said a lot. I want to really validate, what you're saying because I agree that a huge part of love is self-love and courage
Mm-hmm.
and growth
Mm-hmm.
because we're always growing into the next version of ourselves and we need love in order, especially self-love, in order to
Mm-hmm.
be able to have the courage to grow. And, the root word of the courage is the French word cœur, which means heart. Like we need a lot of self-compassion, not self-pity, but self-compassion in order to be able to grow. And so the amount of growth that it takes, first of all, to try to make your relationship work if it's not, takes a lot of courage and self-worth to begin with. And that's why you're saying, try it for months, even for years, etc. Only you know how long you need to try before you've realized. I prefer to use the analogy trying to get blood from a stone. I like to say like beating a dead house plant because I've tried to remove all the non-violent, all the violent idioms towards animals from my vocabulary.
I know I should actually start doing that. I know it's awful, right?
I mean, it's
Um,
it's like one of my actually I Googled it and like beating a dead horse
oh, I don't even want to know.
it
Is it
comes
gonna
from
be?
a necessary like when racehorses are injured they actually have to be killed because they
Uh,
suffer too much if they're not so that's actually the least violent one but I've tried to reprogram all of the violent ones um, anyway but and I don't put shoulds but anyway I'm trying to find the good in what you shared because there's it like if you have tried for however long your intuition says that you've tried everything. And, a lot of people come to me, and I imagine you just to make sure they've tried everything. Like I want to see my blind spots. I want to know I've tried everything. And, we can help to fill those in. But if you tried everything and you're still like trying to get blood from a stone and you can't, then it is indicative of, and yes, I agree. I mean, sometimes logistically, it's not the right time to leave. And that's also um, a highly respectable inquiry to make. How do I really honor myself and others at this time? Um,
mhm.
and, but if it is only if it is not going to be too painful logistically for myself and others to leave, it shows the most self-love and courage and growth in order
Yeah, I
to
mean,
be
it
able
shows
to trust
responsibility. Hmm. It's
that.
okay to be responsible. Yeah, it's okay to consider the other person or if there are kids involved. It's like that is if it's a value, then it'll still add up in your mind, right? Um, and that's why it's just such a deeply personal decision that who am I to say, well, the numbers don't match. Why would you stay in it? No, that's silly. That's totally silly. In fact, sometimes even though the answer is right in front of you, even though your friends are telling you a certain thing, your therapist is saying a certain thing, and it's, and your soul knows sometimes you just, you just have to trust yourself that you'll make that decision when it's right for you.
Yeah, and it helps to have somebody like you who is asking them the right questions. Like what I imagine that you ask a lot of questions about the data. What does this say for you? And after seeing all of this, what do you think is the right decision? And right, like so, I guess how do you work with people who want to integrate this model?
Well, it depends on what they want to use it for. So if they want to use it to realign with their partner, then we'll kind of shift the conversation in that way. First, evaluate whether the top five values are actually conducive to a healthy relationship. Like, are you putting in dependability or reliability, or have you put only things that are superficial, such as materialism, fashion, career, which there's nothing wrong with any of that, but it just has to balance out with the things that are more conducive to a healthy relationship. That's just the bottom line. So I would first see what the values are. I would have each person figure out where they stand. And if there's even one person with a low self score, that's the first thing to tackle. Because once you tackle that, then the conversations after that will be coming from a place of self confidence, of compassion, of a calm mind, and of reason. So that's what I would do for couples who are looking to realign. For individuals who are just looking to rebuild on their self confidence, who want to start showing up at their dates with an inherent glow and radiate, we work on the self score. That's all
Mhm.
that matters. Or if they don't even care to date, they just want to be happy and they just want to stop feeling like they're down in the dumps, then no worries. That's what we work on. If I work with a client who is now ready to go back in the dating world and either they want to get over a breakup or they are over a breakup and now they just want the right tools, then we work on that. At the end of the day, the framework, the coaching, the teaching is usually the same across the board because, like I said, it always starts with the self score, but we work on things to make sure that they are the person that they want to attract and that it's not just the profile that they want to attract, it's the dynamic they need to attract. So, a
Right.
dynamic of respect and a dynamic of reliability. So, do the top values play into that? And if they don't, how can we change lifestyle decisions to make sure that they do? And then if the trait preferences, if we've identified that there are a few that simply are destructive, okay, well, we know that they're there. We know they live in the mind. Okay, so what can we do for the next person who comes in your life? Who shows those traits? Are we going to say, yeah, let me just go for it, even though I have this pattern where it's destructive? Or are we going to say, no, no, I'm gonna move on to the next state.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And it makes so much sense that if people come to you who are just generally unhappy with their life and they're not sure why, that doing the self score would be
Hmm.
huge for that because what creates happiness is that we're really living true to our values. And
Exactly.
you know
Exactly.
the deep ones, not just the superficial ones. And then
Hmm.
of course, and grieving a breakup is about that too. People a lot of times think that grieving is just about feeling the grief and going through the five stages of grief, but of course that's part of it. But then another part of it is evaluating, okay, what can I learn from the past and not make those same mistakes again and grow from the past. And that has a lot to do with the score that we would give ourselves versus the previous partner, and what were we attracted to and who were we being and how were we showing up as incompatible to what's deeply important to us, and how do I correct that. So yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. It just comes down to you. In fact, I used to be an extreme emotional. What that means is I was mostly traits focused and not enough values. I didn't incorporate values enough in my formula and in my calculations. And in seeing that, I'm like, yeah, this is not healthy. The analytics are showing that I'm not likely going to sustain the relationship. But besides that, it's just not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So I started pulling myself back and telling myself, hey, Zoe, start paying attention to the values. Do they fit your values? And in doing that, I learned so much about myself and I caught myself. And now that I feel like I have a good balance and I have a good self score, now I trust myself that
Mm-hmm.
whoever I'm attracting is actually a good fit for me. And if I choose to communicate an issue because it's coming from a good self score, a strong self score, I now have the trust that I am being reasonable and and it's coming from a place of self worth, not coming from a place of either neediness or just unhealthy, unhealed. behaviors, relationship behaviors.
Yeah. It really sounds like a very, very useful framework. And so I'm sure everyone's wondering where can they get your book and how can they learn
Yeah,
more about your work?
yeah. So you can find it on Amazon. If you are curious, feel free to hop on my website, which is Love Can In Fact Be Calculated. There you can find the analytics in terms of what top 5 values tend to be for both men and women, top 5 traits if you're curious, and also across age groups. So you can see where that all fits. Besides that, the coaching information is on there as well. And there are links to purchase the book as well. My Instagram is at Zoey Sharif, and my TikTok is the same handle at Zoey Sharif.
Wonderful. Yeah, I will definitely put a link to your book below this video as well as your website, and I'm sure
Yeah.
your social links are on your website. So I'll put those links
Thank you.
below this video if you are watching on YouTube, and also I'll put it in the show notes if you're listening to the podcast on the podcast platform, so that everyone can find out where to reach you, Zoey, because this has just been such a wonderful wealth of information. And I always teach about balancing the heart with the head, and I think this is just such a wonderful framework for that. It gives people the step-by-step formula on how to do that. So I'm excited to check it out myself too.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks for letting me share my message.
Yeah, I think if everybody had these distinctions, that we didn't just rush into following chemistry and we knew how to really evaluate compatibility, then we'd all waste a lot less time and have a lot more love to give the world. So that's my vision too.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Valerie.
Yeah, and I hope everyone has a love-filled and self-worth filled day.